My first big pitch as an intern was stolen by a rival. I set a trap, left a fake slide on my laptop. That night, I caught him, my own coworker copying my files. But the real shock? My boss was standing right behind him. I still remember my first day in that Manhattan office. The glass walls were so tall, they made me feel like a grain of dust floating inside a giant cube of ambition. Everyone dressed like they were walking on a runway, but with laptops in their arms and deadlines burning holes in their eyes. I was just an intern, but I wanted to prove I could stand here too. I wanted more than coffee runs and sticky notes. I wanted to leave my mark. My manager, Jason, introduced me to the team. All smiles, but his eyes never rested on one thing. Too long, like a man already keeping too many secrets. He said, "This is Emily, our new intern. She'll be helping with research and presentations." I shook hands with a dozen strangers, some warm, some cold, some already measuring me up as competition. The first weeks were a blur of late nights and early mornings, spreadsheets stacked higher than my patience. But I loved it. The rush of numbers, the shine of polished slides, the thrill of presenting ideas that might shape the company's future. One night, I stayed till past midnight, finalizing a pitch for a new app feature. I poured my whole mind into it when I left. I felt like I had planted my flag in the soil of this shiny empire. But a week later, my stomach dropped like a stone in a well because the rival company across town unveiled the exact same pitch, word for word, feature for feature, slide for slide, even the color scheme identical. My boss stormed into the office, slamming the conference room door, papers flying. He said, "How did this leak? Who was careless enough to let this slip?" And all eyes turned on me. The intern, the easy scapegoat. I wanted to scream. It wasn't me, but the words stuck in my throat like pins and needles. I could feel sweat crawling down my spine. I had worked too hard for this to be the end. So soon, so I sat still and quiet. While inside my mind raced faster than Wall Street trading floors, there had to be another explanation. There had to be someone here feeding them our ideas. That night when the office was empty, I walked back in with only the cleaning staff humming around the edges of the floor. I stood at my desk staring at my laptop, thinking of every file I had touched, every email I had sent. Then a thought sparked like fire in the dark. What if it wasn't carelessness? What if it was betrayal? The city lights outside blinked like a million warning signals. The reflection in the glass showed me not as an intern, but as a detective in heels and a blazer. And I whispered to myself, I'm going to find out who is stealing from us no matter what it takes. Do you think the leak was just an accident? Or do you believe someone inside the office is betraying the company? The next morning, I walked into the office with a smile that felt stitched on my face like a mask. Nobody could see the storm building underneath, but I carried it with every step, my heels clicking like tiny hammers on marble floors. I watched everyone more closely than before, the way they typed, the way they whispered over coffee, the way their eyes slid across the room when someone asked about the leak. Jason, my manager, looked tired, more tired than usual, maybe because the executives were breathing down his neck. He said, "The client is furious, we need something new, something stronger. Forget the last pitch, it's gone." And I nodded like a good intern should, but inside I burned because I knew I had made something brilliant and somebody had stolen it right from my desk. At lunch, I sat with Mia from design. She was sweet and always laughed at her own jokes. She asked me if I was okay. I said I was fine, but my voice cracked. She tilted her head and said, "Sometimes things just happen in this industry. People talk ideas, float." And I smiled, but my gut told me she was wrong. Ideas don't just float. They don't move from one laptop to another without hands to carry them. That night, I stayed again later than the rest, and this time, I did more than work. I started watching. I checked the shared drives and saw files accessed at strange hours, times when nobody was supposed to be logged in. I tried to trace the usernames, but they were too generic, too vague. Then I realized something. I had access to the office printers, and those kept a log. Every document printed every person who pressed the button. When I scrolled through the log, my heart skipped. There was my pitch printed 3 times at 2 in the morning, a week before the rival presentation. The username was masked as guest, which made no sense. Interns don't get guest logins, only employees do, which meant someone had hidden their trail. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse drumming like subway wheels. I wasn't crazy. Someone here was a thief, but who? The next day, I tried to watch more carefully. Jason moved fast, always pacing, his phone glued to his hand. Mia doodled during meetings, not paying much attention. There was also Eric from finance. His smile too polished, his tie always perfect. He asked me if I was settling in. I said yes, but I wondered if he was the kind of man who could sell secrets with the same smile he used to charm clients. I decided I needed proof, real proof, something nobody could deny. So I made a copy of my new presentation and slipped in a fake slide. Something absurd, something no real company would ever use if it leaked. I would know instantly, and I would know exactly who had their hands on it. I saved the file under a simple name, left it open on my desktop, and walked away, my heart racing louder than the traffic outside. If you were in her position, would you set a trap like this? Or confront your boss right away with your suspicions? The trap sat on my computer like a loaded gun, silent and waiting. My fake slide showed a ridiculous feature, a voice-activated coffee dispenser inside the app. Something so absurd it made me laugh while typing, but I left it there polished and professional. So it blended in with the rest of the deck. I wanted whoever was stealing to think they had struck gold again. The next morning, I acted normal. I joined meetings, nodded at everything Jason said, scribbled notes that meant nothing. But inside, I was counting the hours waiting for the bait to be taken every time someone passed behind my desk. I felt the air shift like a predator circling. By evening, I pretended to leave. I even waved goodbye to Mia and Eric and rode the elevator down, but when the door shut, I pressed the button back up to a lower floor, then slipped into the stairwell, my pulse thundering like a drum. I climbed quietly until I reached my floor again. I wanted to see if anyone would touch my desk after hours. The office at night was a different creature. The hum of machines, the glow of screens left behind the shadows stretching across glass walls. I crept closer and froze because I saw him. Eric, the finance guy, sitting at my desk, his fingers moving across my keyboard as if the laptop belonged to him. He looked calm too, calm scrolling through my slides like he was shopping. I hid behind a column, my breath shallow watching as he plugged in a small black USB stick copying files. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march right out and confront him, but my brain screamed, "No, not yet. You need evidence. If you blow this now, he'll just deny it." So I pulled out my phone and recorded a short clip, his profile lit by the screen, the USB glowing faintly like a guilty flame. I stopped before he could hear the faint click and stepped back into the shadows, heart hammering against my ribs. I stayed there until he left, briefcase swinging at his side like nothing happened. The next day I expected to hear something, anything but. The office buzzed like usual as if nothing was wrong. Jason announced another client meeting. Mia joked about her cat. Eric smiled at me like he hadn't been stealing from my desk just hours ago. I felt a chill crawl under my skin, because now I knew he was good. Too good at pretending, and maybe I wasn't the only one he had fooled. I opened my laptop and checked the folder. The file was gone, erased completely. My fake coffee dispenser slide, now living somewhere else, carried away by a traitor. I wanted to run straight to Jason, but I stopped, because I remember the way Jason's eyes shifted, always darting, as if hiding things. What if he already knew? What if Eric wasn't working alone? Do you think Eric is the only spy, or is someone else in the office helping him? I barely slept that night. The image of Eric at my desk kept replaying in my head like a broken reel. His calm face, his steady hands, the ease with which he stole my work as if he had done it many times before. But what kept me awake even more was the silence. Why hadn't anyone noticed? Why hadn't Jason confronted me or him? Why was everything moving along like the leak had never happened? The next morning, I dragged myself into the office with dark circles under my eyes and a sharper focus than ever. I decided to test Eric to see how he would react to pressure. So during our coffee break, I casually mentioned that my laptop had been acting strange, files disappearing, reappearing. He froze for just a breath too long, then smiled and said, "Maybe you should get IT to check it out. Interns don't usually have the best setups." His tone was playful, but his eyes were too watchful, like he was measuring if I suspected him. I nodded, played dumb, but inside, my suspicions solidified like concrete. I decided then that one video clip wasn't enough. I needed more evidence, something undeniable, something that would corner him, and whoever might be backing him. So I bought a small hidden camera online, rushed shipping disguised as a power bank. It arrived the next evening and I placed it behind my desk, pointing straight at the screen. That night, I stayed late again, pretending to work, but really waiting. And like clockwork, Eric returned his tie, loosened his briefcase in hand. He moved straight to my desk again, plugging in that same USB. My pulse raced, but this time, I felt a strange calm too, because the lens was capturing everything. Every stolen click, every slide he copied, every smirk that crept across his face as if he owned it all. But then something unexpected happened. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke in a low voice. I couldn't hear all the words, but I caught fragments. "Delivery tonight, need clearance." Jason knows. My stomach dropped like I'd swallowed lead. Jason knows I stayed frozen. Even after he left, the office felt heavier, like the walls themselves were hiding secrets. I pulled the camera, later checked the footage, saw everything clear as day. The theft, the call, the words Jason knows. The next morning, I tried to look at Jason the same way, but I couldn't. His smile seemed sharper, his pacing more restless, and I wondered if he had been covering for Eric the whole time, maybe even ordering him to steal ideas for some bigger deal. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a spider's web, and both of them were holding the threads. I realized then this was bigger than just me proving myself. This was about survival and maybe even safety. If you discovered your manager might be involved too, would you confront him or keep gathering more proof in secret? I walked into the office that morning carrying the weight of a secret too heavy for one person. My fake smile glued to my face as usual. Jason waved at me across the room, his voice upbeat, but I couldn't shake the echo of those words from last night. Jason knows, Jason knows. It was like a riddle burning holes in my head. Did he know Eric was stealing from me? Did he order it, or was Eric bluffing? Either way, I couldn't trust him, not yet. I decided to act like nothing had changed, which felt like balancing on glass. My laptop opened, my fingers typing nonsense while my eyes scanned the room. Every movement, every glance. Mia laughed at her desk, humming while sketching icons. Eric sipped his coffee, talking numbers with someone from sales, and Jason stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, his face tight and unreadable. When lunchtime came, I slipped away down the street instead of joining the team. I needed air, needed distance. I sat at a small cafe corner table, the city buzzing outside, and opened my phone to rewatch the footage. Eric's calm theft, his call. The phrase "Jason knows" the camera had caught it all. I thought about emailing it anonymously to HR, but then I froze. What if HR was compromised too in a place this big? How deep could the rot go? A hand tapped my shoulder. I jumped, nearly spilling coffee. It was Mia. Her smile bright as always. She said, "You look pale. Are you okay?" I nodded quickly, but she sat down anyway. She leaned closer and whispered, "People are saying you're working too hard and that maybe you're nervous about fitting in. Don't worry, we've all been there." Her words seemed kind, but something about her eyes unsettled me. Too sharp, too curious, as if she wanted to know how much I'd seen. How much I suspected. I mumbled thanks and left quickly. The rest of the day passed like a blur, my mind running ahead of me, planning traps within traps. I decided I needed to escalate if Jason really was involved. I couldn't just sit and wait for another theft. I needed to push them to reveal themselves. So that night, I built a second fake presentation, bigger, bolder, with promises of technology that didn't even exist. Yet I layered it with enough jargon to make it convincing, and once again slipped it onto my desktop. But this time, I stayed in the stairwell with my camera rolling. determined to catch every shadow, every breath. Hours passed the office empty and still, until finally footsteps echoed against the marble. Eric again, but this time he wasn't alone. Jason walked in with him side by side like partners. Eric slid into my chair. Jason stood behind him, hands in pockets, watching quietly like a king overseeing his thief. I held my breath as Eric plugged in his USB copying slide after slide. Jason nodded once, satisfied, then walked out without saying a word. I knew then, without doubt, my manager wasn't just aware he was complicit, maybe even in charge. What would you do if you found out your own boss was helping steal your work? Stay quiet? Or risk everything to expose him? I barely slept that night. The image of Jason standing behind Eric burned into my mind like a scar. My boss, my mentor. The one who gave me a chance here was nothing more than a thief dressed in a suit. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Eric had done because Jason had power and he was using it to sell us out. The next morning, I walked into the office, calm on the outside storm. On the inside, I sat at my desk typing quietly, but my thoughts were racing faster than the subways below Manhattan. If Jason and Eric were working together, then they weren't just stealing ideas. They were running a pipeline, feeding secrets to someone bigger. Maybe the rival company, maybe more. I needed to get ahead of them, so I started planning my counterattack, not loud, not messy, but quiet, clever. Like they had been, I researched ways to trace USB activity, ways to leave hidden tags in files, so if they stole them again, I could follow the trail back to wherever they landed, breadcrumbs leading straight to their buyer. Mia drifted by my desk at one point, her smile too casual. She asked if I wanted to grab lunch later, and I said, maybe, but my mind replayed the way she looked at me yesterday, sharp curious. I started to wonder if she knew more than she let on. Maybe she was just friendly, or maybe she was a lookout for Jason and Eric. Either way, I couldn't trust anyone, not yet. That evening, after everyone left, I planted my new bait slides again, polished, convincing, but poisoned with invisible trackers, tiny digital fingerprints that would tell me where they went. I left the file open, locked my screen, and slipped out, pretending once again to go home, but really hiding, just out of sight with my small camera ready, and as expected, they came. Eric first, Jason trailing behind. They moved like a team. Jason pacing quietly while Eric copied the slides onto his USB. But this time I smiled in the dark because I knew what they didn't know, that my trap was already in motion. The next day I checked the tracker, and my stomach flipped. It pinged back not just to the rival company's servers, but to a private email address outside the company registered under a fake name, and the IP traced back to Brooklyn. I felt adrenaline surge through me because now I had more than suspicion. I had a trail, something real, something undeniable. But then a new fear took root. What if they realized I was onto them? What if they discovered the trackers and traced them back to me? I kept my expression steady in the office, but every glance from Jason felt sharper. Every smile from Eric felt like a knife pressed lightly against my throat. I had evidence now, but the question was how long before they figured out I was hunting them. Would you take the evidence to HR immediately, or wait and gather more proof even if it meant risking being caught? The office felt colder after the tracker pinged me awake at 3 a.m, revealing a new hop. The files had been forwarded through a middleman in Queens, then to an encrypted mailbox that disappeared into shells. I sat on my kitchen floor laptop, opened the city humming outside, and realized this was bigger than petty theft. This was organized trade in ideas. I needed help, so I messaged an old college friend now in cybersecurity. She replied, "Meet me tonight. East Village, short, precise, and professional." We met in a dim bar. She scanned the file, frowned, and said, "Breadcrumbs aren't enough. You need proof that ties seller to buyer, not just a trail through proxies." She taught me about harvest servers, fake drop points, and markers that force a device to phone home. If someone opens the file on a phone, we could catch an IP that proxies can't hide from easily. It sounded technical and dangerous, but it was the only way. Back at the office, I moved like an actor, pretending nothing had shifted. I smiled, answered emails, joked when needed. The modified file waited on my desktop like bait, only more irresistible this time. Mobile, friendly, urgent in tone, designed to tempt someone to open it on their phone, not a desktop. That night, they came. Eric first, Jason behind him, and Mia by the door, like a casual observer. I stayed hidden, watching through the camera as Eric fished his phone from his pocket. His face lit by the screen. He scrolled, then his thumb hesitated, then he opened the file. He frowned at something, then his expression hardened. Jason swore under his breath. Mia laughed too loudly, the sound jagged in the empty room. I felt my heart hammering as the phone phoned home and the IP address bled into my tracker. I breathed relief for a beat. Then a cold ripple ran through me because another connection appeared. A login prompt on Jason's laptop, a window I did not recognize, like a second operator watching the transfer. The lights blinked once. Then the office fell to near darkness, the emergency backup humming faintly. Jason moved fast. He crossed to the server rack. His hands shook as he typed commands. The display flashed encrypted lines, and for a moment I thought he might have seen me, but he kept his back turned. I stayed crouched until the click of the stairwell door told me they had left. Then I crept forward, palms sweating. My camera was safe and the tracker had recorded the IP, but the login window created a shadow over everything. It meant they had a fallback, a way to hide what they were doing. In real time, maybe even to erase traces if needed. That night I realized we had forced their hand, but we had also woken a dangerous presence. The man behind the login was unknown and powerful and ruthless. If you had the IP and a suspicious login appearing in real time, would you try to trace it further yourself? Or involve an outside cybersecurity ally immediately? I called my friend in cybersecurity at dawn. She set a secure line and told me not to act alone, to never poke servers without professionals present. We booked a meeting with a contact who could trace the login safely and possibly link the shell to a real account. At work, I moved like a ghost, smiling and typing, but listening. My ears tuned to every footstep, every muffled laugh. Mia stopped by and said, "You look thin. Are you sleeping?" I lied and said, "Fine." She studied me a beat. like someone measuring whether a flame could be trusted to light a room or burn it down. That night, I left by the service stairs to avoid cameras, my phone in airplane mode. I met my friend in a diner and we laid out the files. The footage, the tracker pings. She scrolled, then nodded. This is promising, but she warned tracing the middleman would require legal help and fast coordination with law enforcement, which meant I might be pulled into a criminal case. I thought about my mother, my small town, my student loans, and the job I had fought for. Then I said I would testify if needed. I would stand in court and tell truth, though I knew they would try to make me into something else. A liar? A thief? A girl with an agenda? She took a long breath and said, "We will protect you as best we can." Over the next days, we tightened the net, planting new watermarked files, seeding false metadata to flush out any backup channels. I watched Eric closely. He was careful, but not careful enough. Sometimes his hand brushed the mouse in a way that revealed impatience. Jason paced more than usual, and Mia's laughter grew thinner. Then one evening, the tracker pinged from a webmail account with a name I recognized from corporate filings. It pointed not to the rival alone, but to a shell linked to a logistics firm in Brooklyn. My friend traced a payment trail, small deposits, then larger transfers, and she said that pattern screams laundering of corporate buys. I felt a cold clarity. The theft wasn't about clever employees feeding rivals. It was a business, and we were the product. We prepared the evidence, the footage, the tracker logs, the transfer receipts. My friend called in favors, an investigator, and quietly scheduled a meeting with a detective who owed her one. He agreed to look at the files, and for the first time since the leak, I felt like the world might tilt back into place. But I also felt for the first time how dangerous truth could be, because when it lands on the wrong table, people move to bury it. We set a date to hand everything over and rehearsed how I would speak under pressure. We prepared safe houses and emergency contacts, and I learned to sleep with one eye open. And family. Would you bring in outside experts for help right away, or try to handle the investigation yourself to avoid drawing attention? The detective met me in a windowless room at the precinct. He had a scar along his cheek and eyes that read like paper. I laid out the footage, the tracker logs, and the payment trails. He watched the screen and tapped a pen. He said, "You have guts, kid. But this will get messy." He explained we would need subpoenas to the shell corporations, email hosts, and banks. And for that, we needed probable cause, which meant we had to be very careful about how we presented the files. My friend in cybersecurity stayed close, guiding how to present the digital evidence. We sanitized personal identifiers that could tie the trap to my camera, but left the footprints that showed who opened what when. The detective promised discretion, but warned me to expect retaliation from people with money and power, and to avoid being alone after hours. Back at work, things changed subtly. Eric's smiles vanished, and Jason wore a new suit as if armor. I noticed Mia moving between meetings with a notepad and a phone tucked like a talisman. I realized the three of them had roles, and maybe more people were involved in the chain. The building felt smaller, like a box closing around secrets. One afternoon, I received an email from an unknown account. A single line read, "We can make this disappear. Meet us at a coffee shop on Canal Street at noon." I nearly dropped my mug. My hand shook, but I did not reply. Instead, I printed the message signed with the detective's card and walked into the meeting with two plainclothes officers waiting. A pale man sat across. He softened his voice and said, "We can help you if you stop the legal action." I saw his eyes flick to the detective and something in his expression. I told him calmly I had already given everything to the police. He smiled and said, "Think of your future. There are easier ways than court." But I stared back and said, "I would rather burn the bridge than get paid to look the other way." He left without a word, his card left on the table like a stain. After that confrontation, the atmosphere at work turned poisonous. Whispers followed me down corridors. Coffee cups slid away as if hot smudges would cling to me. I began to receive small threats, anonymous notes taped to my locker, a key in the mail, a photo of my apartment door taken from across the street. Fear moved into my life like an unwelcome roommate. The detective increased security and advised I stay elsewhere for a few nights. I called my mother and said I was on a work trip. She sounded worried, but I told her not to worry. I had to be ready. At night, I checked locks, rehearsed my testimony until sleep came light. If you were getting anonymous threats after exposing wrongdoing, would you stay and fight publicly or step back to protect yourself first? The detective moved with quiet force. Subpoenas froze. Accounts the Shell Corporation unraveled, and at last the trail I had followed led to real names and hard paper. At work, everything shifted. Jason smiled. Les Eric came in, late looking smaller, and Mia avoided my gaze. I carried the files like proof that the world could be made to answer for itself. In a sterile conference room, we laid out the logs, the footage, and the payment receipts. The detective played the video, and the room went still. The forensic markers matched timestamps and led to a broker who handled payments for idea buyers. Jason's lawyers shouted entrapment and manipulation. They tried to turn the room into theater and paint me as reckless, but the evidence was a lattice too tight to break. The broker under question saw the prints and began to speak. He named numbers, emails, a buyer, a firm with pockets deep enough to hide mistakes. Once a name surfaced, the rival company could no longer deny contact. Records emerged, subpoenas multiplied, and boardrooms shifted. The company announced internal changes and arrests, followed for the broker and for Eric, while Jason resigned amid allegations. Victory felt strange. No fireworks, only the slow unfurling of consequences. People who had been kind stepped away. Others offered quiet apologies. The office where I'd learned to be small now felt foreign, and I packed my things with hands that did not tremble. Outside, the city held its indifferent shape, but I felt altered like a book whose pages had been rewritten. I had come for a chance and walked away, having pushed truth into light. I'd learned that silence can be bought and that speaking could cost you everything. The legal process took months. I testified, the broker confirmed transfers, and a judge approved more subpoenas. Slowly, more names surfaced and a small net closed. The press arrived. Cameras flashed. My mother watched and called to say she was proud, though, worried I told her I was exhausted, but that truth mattered. Recruiters reached out, but I chose a firm where credit meant giving credit. My new colleagues listened and praised work. I mentored interns, telling them to keep records and trust carefully. On the final night before I left, I walked along the river, lights flickered on water, and I felt a steady calm. Not fireworks, but a worn peace. I choose to stand taller now. After everything, would you return to corporate life and try to change it from within, or walk away completely to protect your peace?